broke waitress used his hand to threaten a customer she had no idea. He was a mafia kingpin. The rain in New Alexandria does not just fall, it attacks. It hammered the plate glass windows of the Tallow Finch like it was trying to collect a debt, blurring the neon sign into a wet pink smear. It was 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and the place was drowning. Inside and out, the air was thick with the competing smells of wet wool, stale coffee, and the sharp sizzle of onions on the flat top. I navigated the chaos, my apron pockets heavy with loose change and my mind heavier with numbers. $2,465. That was the latest bill from St. Jude's, the one marked immediate attention. My mother's lungs. My feet ached from a 10-hour double shift, but the hollow ache in my chest was worse. Every clatter of a plate, every impatient ring of the service bell was a reminder of the clock ticking down. I was 24 years old, and I felt ancient. He was in booth 4, and he had been there since 7, part of a loud group of contractors, their laughter bouncing off the worn tile. Now he was the last one left, and his eyes had been following me for the past hour, sticky and unavoidable. Another coffee. Honey, he slurred, and his hand, damp and thick, shot out and clamped around my wrist as I reached for his empty cup. My skin crawled. The cheap ceramic mug felt heavy. "Right away, sir." I tried to pull my arm back, a polite, firm tug. His grip tightened, fingers digging into the bone. "What's the rush?" He grinned, his teeth stained. "Sit with me. Have a drink." "I cannot do that, sir. I am working." "Working," he sneered, pulling my arm slightly, forcing me to lean closer. "I am paying. You are working. Same difference. Right." I felt the familiar, hot tremor start in my knees. I hated this part of the job. I hated the way my voice automatically went small, the way I had to calculate the cost of my own dignity, make a scene, and lose the tip, and that was $10, maybe 15. I could not put toward the prescription copay. I had to swallow the acid rising in my throat and pray he would get bored. "Please let go of my arm," I said, keeping my voice level. The ambient noise of the diner seemed to dip. Just for a second, this was the moment, the pivot. I had not seen the other man arrive. He was at the counter, a ghost in a perfectly tailored black coat that seemed to drink the weak diner light. He had not ordered, he was just sitting, a glass of water untouched in front of him, watching the entire room in the long, warped mirror behind the bar. He was still, utterly still. In a room full of noise and frantic motion, his stillness was louder than the drunks shouting. The drunk in booth 4 saw me looking, my gaze flicking to the stranger. "What? That your boyfriend?" The drunk laughed, a wet, barking sound. He shoved his chair back, the legs scraping the floor, and stood up. He was big, a foot taller than me, and he smelled like stale beer and sawdust. "You are ignoring me, sweetheart. That is rude." He raised his hand. Maybe it was to grab my shoulder. Maybe it was just to wag a finger in my face. It did not matter. It was coming toward me, fast and aggressive. I did not think. I did not plan. I reacted. I was not near the hot coffee pot. I was not near a steak knife. I was, however, standing right beside the silent man at the counter. In one fluid motion, I sidestepped the drunk's lunge and my hand shot out. I grabbed the still man's hand where it rested, placidly, on the Formica counter. It was heavy. It was warm. It felt solid as marble, the bones strong beneath clean skin. I did not hold it. I used it. I shoved his hand, palm first, directly into the drunk's collarbone. I used the stranger's weight as my own, a human lever. The drunk stumbled back a step, his eyes wide, shocked by the sudden, solid impact. The Tallow Finch went dead silent. The clatter of cutlery stopped. The kitchen grill was the only sound left, a low hiss. I kept the stranger's hand pressed against the drunk's chest. My own voice came out, low and steady, a voice I did not recognize. It was my mother's voice, the one she used when the collectors called. "He does not like getting his hands dirty. Do not make him." I was bluffing. I was bluffing with a complete stranger's body. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would break my ribs. The drunk stared, not at me, but at the man whose hand I was currently borrowing. The man in the black coat did not move. He did not pull his hand back. He did not tense. He did not flinch. He simply allowed it. His eyes, cold and dark as the lake water outside, met mine. A single eyebrow lifted, a fractional movement of what looked like dry amusement. Then his gaze shifted, bypassing me, bypassing the drunk. He looked at the mirror behind the bar. His eyes swept the room, calm and methodical. Booth 6, where two of the drunk's friends were pretending not to watch, the two men by the door who had stopped talking. He was counting. He was assessing the threat. He did it in less than a second. The drunk felt the shift. He felt the absolute, chilling lack of fear from the man in the coat. The stranger's hand was still on his chest, pushed there by me, but the man himself was radiating an aura of absolute, terrifying calm. The drunk's florid, red face went a pale, sickly gray. "Hey, man, Mao," he stammered, raising his own hands. I was just playing, no harm." He fumbled in his back pocket, pulling out a wallet. He threw a card onto the table. It was not a credit card. It was a preloaded compensation card from his construction firm. "For the trouble," he said, nodding at me. "For the lady. We are good." He grabbed his jacket from the booth and was gone, his friends shuffling out of their own seats and following him. A sudden, sober retreat. The diner door swung shut, cutting off the sound of the rain for a second. The silence remained for 1 beat, 2 beats, then the chatter roared back, louder than before, a dam of noise breaking. I was still holding the stranger's hand. I dropped it like it was burning. Heat flooded my face, painful and bright. "Oh my God," I whispered, my hand flying to my mouth. "I'm so sorry. He was going to—" "I know what he was," the man said. His voice was quiet, a low gravel that cut straight through the diner noise without rising above it. He turned back to his untouched water, as if nothing had happened. He had not been touched. He had not been threatened. I had done it all. Just as I was trying to find the words to apologize again, to explain the hospital bills and the desperation, another man walked in. This one was built like a refrigerator, broad shoulders straining a functional gray jacket. He walked straight past us, went directly to booth 4, picked up the stool the drunk had knocked over, and wiped the counter where a little beer had spilled. He pocketed the comp card from the table. He did it all with a quiet, practiced efficiency. He glanced at the man in the black coat. The man gave a slight, dismissive nod. The broad-shouldered man, Rowan Cade, vanished toward the back exit. He was with him. He was his. The man in the black coat stood up. He was taller than I had realized, lean and powerful. He placed a few bills on the counter, enough for his water. Then he placed a few more, a thick fold of them. "This covers everyone," and he said, his voice flat. I stared at the pile of money. It was hundreds. "What, sir? You do not have to do that. I was the one who—" "It is done." He looked at me, and his eyes were not amused anymore. They were analytical. They were weighing me. "You took a risk." "I did not know what else to do," I said, my voice finally trembling. "You used me as a shield." Yes, I'm so sorry." "Do not be—" He paused, adjusting the cuff of his shirt, a simple, elegant movement. "But you made a promise. In that threat, you vouched for my character." I frowned, the exhaustion making my thoughts slow. "I do not understand." "You just promised me you will not walk home alone tomorrow night." He did not wait for an answer. He turned and walked out. The bell above the door gave a polite, tiny jingle. I rushed to the window, wiping the condensation away with the heel of my hand. The broad-shouldered man was already on the sidewalk, holding an umbrella, a black sedan, the kind that cost more than my mother's total medical debt, slid away from the curb. It did not speed. It just moved, and the rain and the city seemed to part for it. It disappeared, a black smear on a wet canvas. The tallow finch was loud again. Orders were up. The coffee was burning, but I just stood there, my hand tingling where it had touched his. Who was he? The promise I had made, or rather, the promise he had inflicted on me, hung in the air for exactly 24 hours. He had said tomorrow night, but the next night, he did not come. The tallow finch was just its usual, chaotic self. The drunk from booth 4 was a bad memory, and the man in the black coat was a ghost. I convinced myself the whole thing had been a fever dream, a stress-induced hallucination. I finished my double shift, my feet aching, and walked the long way home, avoiding Pier 17 just in case. Nothing happened. The night after that, however, I was running late. My mother had a bad turn. I spent an hour holding a plastic basin for her, her thin body racked with coughs that sounded like tearing silk. I left St. Jude's long after visiting hours, my heart feeling like a cold, heavy stone in my chest. The bus was late, and by the time I got to the Port District, it was nearly midnight. I was exhausted. I was not thinking about ghosts in black coats. I was thinking about how I was going to pay the $300 for the new medication they wanted to try. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a number I did not recognize. Do not take Pier 17 tonight. I stared at the screen. A cold bolt of fear, sharp and sudden, cut through my exhaustion. It was the same as the warning I had ignored 2 nights prior, only I had ignored that one, and this was a new one. But Pier 17 was the fastest way to my apartment. It was late. I was tired, and I was angry. I was tired of being scared, tired of being poor, tired of cryptic warnings from people who did not have the guts to show their faces. I turned down Pier 17. The fog was thick off the lake, swallowing the weak yellow glow of the few working streetlights. The warehouses were dark, looming shapes. My footsteps were too loud on the wet cobblestones. It was the kind of quiet that feels like it is listening. I was halfway to the main road when I heard it, the low diesel rumble of a heavy engine, idling somewhere in the shadows. A pickup truck, matte black and lifted high on huge tires, pulled out from a loading bay, blocking the street, its headlights snapped on, high beams pinning me, bleaching the world white. I froze. The passenger door opened. A man got out. He was just a shape against the blinding light. Just a waitress, huh? His voice was rough. You think you are smart, pulling a stunt like that at the Finch? My throat closed. This was the drunk's friend, the one from booth 6. I do not want any trouble, I said, my voice a pathetic squeak. I started to back away. A little late for that, he said, taking a step toward me. The circle does not like being disrespected, especially not by some girl. He lunged. I stumbled back, my heel catching on a loose stone. I went down hard. My bag flew from my hand, skittering across the pavement. I landed on my hip, the impact jarring my teeth. The man laughed. Not so tough now. He was almost on top of me when a different set of headlights cut through the fog, coming from the street I had just left. A car door opened and closed. The black sedan? Ernesto Bartolucci did not hurry. He walked calmly into the glare of the truck's high beams. He was not wearing his coat, just a dark sweater, and he looked almost casual, if not for the absolute stillness in his face. The man from the truck stopped. He looked from me, on the ground, to Ernesto. This is not your business, the truck man snarled, trying to sound brave. Ernesto did not answer him. He looked past him, at the driver still inside the truck. He lifted one hand, palm out, and simply closed it into a fist, a single, quiet gesture. The truck's horn honked, a sharp, impatient sound. The man standing over me looked back, confused. What? The horn honked again. The driver was signaling him. "We are supposed to grab her!" the man yelled at the truck. Ernesto took one step forward. "No," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the fog and the engine noise. "You are not. You are supposed to leave." The man hesitated, caught between his orders and the man in front of him. He made his choice. He spat on the ground near my feet, then scrambled back into the pickup. The truck reversed, its tires screaming, and then shot down a side alley. disappearing into the darkness. The silence that fell was heavy. I was still on the ground, shaking, my hip throbbing. Ernesto stood there, watching the alley the truck had taken. "I told you," he said, his voice flat. "You sent that text," I accused, pushing myself up onto my elbows. The adrenaline was making me reckless. "You knew they would be here." "I knew they might be." He finally looked at me. "The Orpheus Circle is getting aggressive. They are pushing into territories that are not theirs. They are looking for any excuse to start a fire. And I am an excuse." I gathered my bag, my hands trembling so hard I could barely zip it. Because of what I did at the diner, I am just a waitress. "Yes," he said, walking closer. He stopped a few feet away. "You are... And last night, you used my hand like it was a loaded weapon. You did not cry. You did not run. You bluffed a room full of hard men and you won." He crouched down, not to help me, but to be on my level. His eyes were dark, and for the first time, I saw something in them besides ice. It looked like annoyance. "That kind of smart," he said, "is dangerous. It gets noticed. They think you are with me, and now they wanted to see how I would react if they took you." "I am not with anyone," I hissed. Finally getting to my feet, I winced as I put weight on my leg. "I just want to be left alone." "That is no longer an option." He straightened up, towering over me. He glanced at my leg. "The car. I will take you to your mother's hospital. You need to get that hip looked at." "No, I'm fine. I am not getting in your car." A flicker of impatience crossed his face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. It was thick. He held it out. "What is that?" "It is for the surgery, the one you were discussing at St. Jude's this afternoon." My blood ran cold. "You were at the hospital. You were following me." "I was protecting an asset." "I am not an asset." I shoved the envelope back at him, my palm hitting his chest. It was like hitting concrete. "I am not taking your money. I do not know what kind of dirty game this is, but I want no part of it. Stay away from me. Stay away from my mother." I started to limp away, pushing past him. "Your pride is going to get you killed, Lila." I ignored him, my heart hammering, and disappeared into the fog, not looking back to see if he watched me go. The next night at the diner was tense. Every time the bell jingled, my shoulders seized up. I was waiting for the Orpheus Circle. I was waiting for Ernesto. Neither came. But Rowan Cade did. He slid onto a counter stool at 6:55, exactly 5 minutes before my shift started. He ordered a black coffee. When I brought it to him, he spoke so quietly I had to lean in. "Mr. Bartolucci was informed that your employer at the Tallow Finch owes protection money to the Kehoe family." I blinked. "I do not know who that is." "They are not the Orpheus Circle," Rowan said, sipping his coffee. "The Circle knows this. They plan to make an example of this place tonight, to prove the Kehoes cannot protect their clients." My stomach turned to ice. "Make an example?" "Fire, most likely," he said, as calmly as if discussing the weather, "or at least enough damage to shut it down." My only job, the only thing keeping my mother at St. Jude's." "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. Rowan finished his coffee and placed the empty mug down. He looked at me, his eyes surprisingly neutral. "So you understand what is at stake." He stood up, left a $20 bill, and walked out. I was shaking. I looked at the clock. 7 o'clock. At 8:15, the bell on the door jingled. Ernesto Bartolucci walked in. He was wearing the black coat again. He ignored the hostess, ignored the other patrons, and walked directly to the corner booth, the one that watched the entire room, the front door, and the street. He sat down. I grabbed a menu and a glass of water, my hands numb. I walked over. "You came," I said stupidly. He did not look up from the street. "They are late." "The Orpheus Circle." He nodded, a sharp, tiny movement. He finally turned his gaze to me. It was heavy, intense. He looked at me for a long, silent moment, as if memorizing my face. "Tomorrow night," he said, his voice final. I will be at this table. 7 o'clock, you will be my waitress. What are you going to do? I am going to stop them from burning down your income. He looked back out the window. But I need you here. They think you are mine. If they are coming to make a statement, they will want the audience to be present. He was going to use me as bait. Do not be late, he said. It was not a request. It was a command. I arrived at 6:45, my stomach a cold knot. The diner was half empty. The calm before the storm. My boss, Sal, was nervously wiping down an already clean counter, his eyes flicking to the door. He knew something was happening. The Port District always knew. But he did not know what. At exactly 7 o'clock, the bell jingled. Ernesto Bartolucci walked in. He moved with the same infuriating, unhurried grace. He did not look left or right. He just came straight to the corner booth, slid in, and placed his hands flat on the table. I grabbed my notepad. My hands were clammy. "Good evening," I said, my voice sounding thin. "Can I get you something?" "Ginger tea," he said, his eyes on the street. "Hot, no sugar." "We just have regular Lipton." "Ginger tea," he repeated, still not looking at me. I went to the back. Sal kept a small stash of herbal teas for his wife. I found a box of ginger turmeric, my hands shaking as I tore the packet. I brought it to him, the hot water steaming. He did not thank me. He just watched the rain, which had started again, slicking the pavement. I stood there, holding my notepad like a shield. "They are really coming, are not they?" "They will," he said. "They have to. They made a threat. If they do not show, they look weak." "And you?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "What do you get out of this?" He finally turned his head. His gaze was heavy, pinning me in place. "I get to stop them. The Orpheus Circle is bad for business. They are sloppy. They deal in things that attract the wrong kind of attention. They bring heat to the entire port." He unwrapped the tea bag and dipped it into the water, watching the color bleed out. "They are like ships that lose their signal in the fog. They go off course. They hit the rocks, and their cargo spills onto everyone's shore." I understood the metaphor. Dark shipping, drugs, probably. The kind of cargo he did not want spilling. "And you are the harbor master," I ventured. A tiny smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Something like that." I refilled a salt shaker at the next table, just to have something to do with my hands. I wanted to be an art therapist for kids in the system. He looked surprised, a genuine crack in his armor. "Art therapy." "I was in school for it," I said, my voice quiet. "I finished 2 years. I was good at it, helping kids process things they could not say, through painting, but then my mother, she got sick. The bills." I shrugged, the gesture feeling heavy and old. "So now I serve coffee." "Painting," he said, testing the word. He looked at my hands. "You have the hands for it. Steady." It was a strange compliment coming from him, especially after I'd used his own hand as a weapon. The bell on the door jingled. My heart leaped into my throat. A group of 5 young men swaggered in. They were not the usual Tallow Finch crowd. They were too loud, too postured. Their jackets new and their eyes darting around. Orpheus. They took the large booth in the center of the room, shoving it slightly, making a loud scraping noise. One of them immediately put his muddy boots up on the vinyl seat. Sal looked at me, terrified. Ernesto took a slow sip of his tea. He did not even turn around. "Go take their order, Lila," he said, his voice quiet but firm. I walked over. My knees felt like water. "Welcome to the Finch. Can I start you with some drinks?" The one with the boots, clearly the leader, grinned at me. Well, look who it is, the tough girl." He looked past me, pointedly at Ernesto's back. "You and your boyfriend having a date night." "Coffee," I said, my pen held tight. "Or are you just here to scuff the seats?" He laughed, but his eyes were cold. He was about to say something else when I saw his friend, sitting opposite, subtly tap his phone. He was filming. He was filming me. And he was filming Ernesto. They were here to provoke, to get a reaction, to post it, to prove a point. I had to move them. "You know," I said, forcing a casual tone, "that booth is terrible. The heat vent blows right on your neck." I pointed to the booth in the other corner, the one tucked away by the restrooms. "That one is warmer and bigger." The leader sneered. "We like this one." "Suit yourself." I shrugged. "It is just that is the only spot in the whole diner where the security camera does not work." I tapped my temple. "Bad wiring. Sal keeps meaning to fix it." I gestured up at the little black dome in the ceiling. It was a lie. I had no idea if it worked. The leader's eyes followed my gesture. He looked at his friend, who had frozen, phone in hand. The grin on his face faltered. The last thing they wanted was to be recorded starting a fight they might not finish. He cursed under his breath. "Fine." He shoved his friends. "Move. Over there. This place is a dump anyway." They scrambled out of the booth and relocated to the one by the restrooms, grumbling. They were now in a perfect corner, out of sight of the street, with only one way in or out, a blind spot. I walked back to Ernesto's table. He was looking at me, his head tilted. He took another sip of tea. He gave a single, slow nod. Approval. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a blaze of heat. He had seen what I did. He understood the strategy. The diner was quiet for a moment, tense. Then the lights went out. A collective gasp. The room was plunged into absolute darkness. The only light, the faint, wet glow from the street. A woman screamed. 1 second, 2 seconds. The lights snapped back on. Everyone was blinking, disoriented. The Orpheus group was half out of their booth, their chairs knocked over, ready for a fight that had not come. The bell on the door jingled softly as someone left. I looked at Ernesto. He was exactly as he had been, his hand around his teacup. He was completely unbothered. "What was that?" I whispered. "Why, Rowan, he said, his voice calm. "He dislikes faulty wiring." It was not a power surge. It was a message. Rowan Cade, his refrigerator-sized man, was outside. He was telling the Orpheus group that he controlled the power. He controlled the exits. He controlled the environment. There would be no fight. There would only be a humiliation. The Orpheus leader looked around, his face pale. The bravado was gone. He understood. This was not a fair fight. It was a trap. He threw a $10 bill on the table. "This coffee stinks." They fled, pushing each other to get out the door. The diner exhaled. Sal looked like he was going to cry with relief. I slumped against the partition, the adrenaline draining, leaving me shaking. Ernesto watched me. "You did well," he said. "They will just come back," I said, my voice hollow. "No, they will not. Not here. You took their camera, and Rowan took their power. Tonight, they are just 5 wet kids who ran from a blackout. There is no honor in that." He finished his tea. I felt a sudden, desperate need to understand. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Not your name. What do you do?" "Ernesto." He looked at me, a long, assessing gaze. The corner of his mouth twitched again, that ghost of a smile. "I settle disputes," he said. "The kind that cannot go to court. I keep the fog from swallowing the whole harbor." Before I could process that, my phone buzzed in my apron. The sound was horribly loud in the quiet diner. I pulled it out. St. Jude's Hospital. My blood ran cold. I answered. "Hello." It was Dr. Evans. "Lila, we had a complication. Your mother's breathing is unstable. We wanted to wait a few weeks for the new treatment, but I think we need to do the interventional procedure tonight." Tonight, I gripped the phone. "But the deposit, the insurance pre-approval, you said it was $7,000 just to start." "I know," Dr. Evans said, his voice full of professional pity. "And we cannot proceed without it. That is the hospital policy. I can keep her stable for a few hours. But Lila, you need to make a decision." The phone felt slick in my hand. My vision tunneled. $7,000. I did not have 700. I did not have 70. I was going to lose her. I was going to lose my mother because I did not have enough money. I hung up. a sob catching in my throat. I looked at Ernesto. My eyes blurred. He was already standing. He had heard. Of course he had heard. "Give me the doctor's name." And he said, his voice was not soft. It was not compassionate. It was pure, cold efficiency. "What?" "The doctor's name. And the hospital administrator's. I will handle the paperwork." I shook my head, the tears spilling over. "No, I cannot. I cannot take your money. I told you." "I am not giving you money, Lila." He stood over me, a shadow blocking out the diner lights. "I am buying you time. It is a transaction." "I have nothing to pay you with," I cried, my voice cracking. He looked at me, and his expression was unreadable, but his voice was quiet, and it held an odd, rough-textured gentleness that undid me. "Pride is a beautiful suit of armor," he said, his voice low, "but it is heavy, and right now, you have to choose." He held out his hand, palm up, not for money, for my phone. "You have to choose between the armor and the person inside it." A spark, that was what it was. It was not soft. It was not sweet. It was sharp, like flint striking steel. He respected my stubbornness, my stupid, pointless pride, and I was terrified of him, but I was suddenly, desperately grateful for his brutal, decisive strength. I looked at his outstretched hand. I looked at the diner door. I looked at the phone, which held my mother's life. I made my choice. The call to Dr. Evans had felt like a surrender. I gave Ernesto the names. He made a single call, his voice low and clipped, speaking in a language that might have been Italian but was mostly just the syntax of pure command. When he hung up, he simply said, "She is in surgery. It is handled." He did not ask for a thank you, just paid for his tea and left. I was left in the wreckage of the diner, my hands shaking, suspended between the terror of what I had just done and the overwhelming relief that my mother was safe. The next night, the storm broke. It was not Orpheus this time. It was worse. At 8 o'clock, during the peak of the dinner rush, 2 men in cheap gray suits walked in. They did not look like cops. They looked like auditors, which was somehow more frightening. They flashed badges that read MIB, Metropolitan Integrity Bureau. "We are here for a code compliance inspection," the taller one said, his voice oily. Sal came running, wiping his hands on his apron. "Inspection, I just passed my health and safety last month." "This is not health and safety, sir," the second man said, opening a thick binder. "This is a structural zoning and integrity audit." For the next hour, they tore the diner apart, not physically, but with red ink. They measured the distance between the booths. They checked the wattage on the exit signs. They demanded invoices for the coffee delivery from 3 months ago. It was a performance, and I was the intended audience. Every few minutes, one of them would look at me, a clipboard in hand, and make a note. Finally, they slammed the binder on the counter. It was, I swear, an inch thick with carbon copy violation slips. "This establishment is a disaster," the tall one announced to the now silent diner. "You've got 57 violations. Mr. Sal, 57, ranging from improper fire suppression clearance to potential tax discrepancies on your dairy invoices." Sal looked like he was going to faint. 57, that is impossible." "It is right here," the man tapped the binder. "The fines alone will be in the range of $20,000, of course. We could just shut you down, right now." He slid the top form towards Sal. "Or you can sign the preliminary admission, and we can discuss a probationary solution." Sal fumbled for a pen. "He will not be signing that." Ernesto Bartolucci was standing right behind them. He had not used the front door. He must have come through the kitchen. He was not alone. A sharp-looking woman in a severe blue suit stood beside him, carrying a thin leather briefcase. The MIB men turned, startled. "And who are you?" the tall one sneered. "I am a concerned neighbor," Ernesto said smoothly. He nodded to the woman. "And this is my lawyer. She's also a concerned neighbor." The lawyer stepped forward and placed her briefcase on the counter with a quiet click. "Metropolitan Integrity Bureau," she said, her voice like cut glass. Interesting. I was unaware the city charter had approved such a department, especially one that conducts audits without a 72-hour written notice, as required by City Administrative Code, subsection 41B. The tall man's face tightened. This is an emergency citation. An emergency. The lawyer smiled, a thin, dangerous expression. An emergency involving milk invoices. She opened her briefcase. You see, I called the city controller's office about 15 minutes ago. They have never heard of the MIB. They have, however, heard of fraud. And impersonating a city official is a third-degree felony. The two men looked at each other. The color was draining from their faces. And as for these violations, the lawyer continued, flipping through the binder with disdain. This improper fire suppression note, the tallow finch, is grandfathered under the 1984 code, not the current one. This zoning issue. This lot has been zoned commercial since 1950, and this tax discrepancy, it is a typo. She snapped the binder shut. You have two options. You can leave, now, and we will forget this happened. Or you can stay, and I will have the actual police here in 3 minutes to arrest you for extortion. The tall man grabbed the binder. This is not over, he hissed, but his voice was thin. They turned and practically ran out the front door. The diner was silent. Sal was hyperventilating into a paper bag. Ernesto looked at me. Are you all right? Before I could answer, a sudden, muffled pop came from the parking lot. It sounded like a gunshot, but flat. Someone yelled, "Fire!" The diner erupted. Patrons scrambled from their booths, shoving toward the door. Smoke, thick and gray, was pouring in from the entrance. It was not fire smoke. It smelled chemical, like fireworks, a smoke bomb. In the chaos, someone grabbed my arm, hard. It was not a customer. It was one of the Orpheus kids from the night before, his face masked by a handkerchief. "You are coming with us," he snarled, yanking me toward the back exit. I screamed, but the sound was lost in the panic. He never made it 2 steps. Rowan Cade materialized from the smoke. He did not hit the man. He simply grabbed the man's wrist, the one holding me, and squeezed. There was a sickening, dull crack of bone. The man howled, a high-pitched sound of pure agony, and his hand fell away from my arm. He looked past Rowan, his eyes wide with terror. Ernesto was standing by the counter, watching. He had not moved. He just watched. His eyes were cold, flat, and full of a terrible promise. The Orpheus kid scrambled to his feet, clutching his broken wrist, and fled out the back door into the night. The smoke began to clear. The lawyer was calmly directing patrons to the street, assuring them it was just a prank. Rowan had vanished. Ernesto walked over to me. I was leaning against the coffee machine, my legs shaking too hard to stand. "They will not stop," he said, his voice low. "They tried a direct threat. They tried a bureaucratic threat. Now, they tried force. They want you because they think you are my leverage." "I am not your leverage," I whispered, my voice raw from the smoke. "It does not matter what you are," he said. "It matters what they think. You are not safe here. You are not safe in your apartment." He looked around the diner, at the spilled drinks and overturned chairs. "This place is not safe. Not for you. Not for Sal." Where am I supposed to go? The reality of my situation was crashing down. I was toxic. I was a target. "You will come with me," he said. "There is a place. Artifacts. It is a warehouse I own in the old tannery district. You will stay there until this fog clears." It was not a request. It was the same tone he had used to order the surgery. It was a statement of fact. "My mother is in the best wing at St. Jude's," he said, cutting me off. "They have a private guard on her floor. She is safer than you are. Now, get your coat." From an orbital path hundreds of miles above New Alexandria, a satellite camera adjusted its lens. The heat signature from the smoke bomb in the Tallow Finch parking lot registered as a minor anomaly, a hotspot. In a dark, quiet room, Agent Julian Price of the Harborway Intelligence Division watched the feed. He saw the chaos. He saw me leave with Ernesto Bartolucci. Well, well, Price murmured, sipping cold coffee. He's moving his asset. He's emotionally compromised. He zoomed in, trying to get a clear shot of my face. She is the key. Find out who she is. I do not care what it takes. Get me leverage on his leverage. The artifacts warehouse smelled like sawdust, old turpentine, and metal. It was vast. The front was a loading dock, but Ernesto led me through a reinforced steel door into a cavernous back room. It had once been a gallery. The lights were low, but I could see them. Dozens of them, empty picture frames hanging on the exposed brick walls, ornate gold frames, simple black gallery frames, all of them surrounding nothing but blank, white space. A small, clean cot was set up in the corner, next to a table with an electric kettle and a small refrigerator. It was Spartan, but it was clean, and it was solid. The walls were 3 feet thick. "It is empty," I said, looking at the frames. Ernesto stood in the middle of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. It was my mother's. She was a painter. After she died, I could not look at her work, but I could not sell it. So I keep the frames. He walked over to a large, dusty canvas leaning against the wall. He turned it around. It was blank. She always said a blank canvas was the most honest thing in the world. No lies, no mistakes, just potential. He looked at me, his gaze softening for the first time. I had Rowan bring some supplies. They are in the footlocker. Charcoals, paints, brushes. If you ever want to paint again. I stared at him. The hospital, the lawyer, this fortress, the art supplies. He had seen every part of me. The terrified daughter, the broke waitress, the failed artist. "Why?" I finally whispered, the word feeling too small for the room. "Why me, Ernesto?" That night at the diner. All I did was grab your hand. Why do all this? He turned to look at a large, empty frame, his profile cut against the dim light. "The world is full of people who are afraid. Lila, they run, they hide, they cry, they negotiate. That is what fear does." He turned back to me. His eyes were not cold now. They were clear, and they were steady. "That night, you were terrified. I could see it. The drunk was bigger than you. He was aggressive, and you were trapped. You had every reason to be afraid." He took a step closer. "But you were not. You did not run. You did not cry. You chose to fight. You chose to pick up the nearest weapon, and it just happened to be me." He stopped, just a few feet away, his presence filling the space between us. "You chose not to be afraid. That is rare, and I do not let rare things break." I stood in the cold, vast silence of the warehouse, the smell of turpentine and old canvas stinging my nose. The rows of empty frames on the walls seemed to watch me, a gallery of missing pieces. "Rare," I repeated, my voice small in the cavernous space. "You make me sound like something you would collect, another empty frame to hang on your wall." He did not deny it. He turned from me, walking toward a tall, grime-coated window that overlooked the distant, blurred lights of the port. "New Alexandria was built on the water," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The port is its heart, but a heart has chambers. My family. We have been here since the first docks were built. We are one of several. The families. We keep the peace. We coordinate. We ensure the cargo moves, the men get paid, and the city does not poison itself." "Poison," I said. The word hung in the air. "Greed," he clarified. "The Orpheus Circle is new. They are not from here. They do not follow the rules. They do not care about the neighborhoods, the families. They just want money, and they do not care what they sell to get it." He finally turned to face me, his shadow long in the dim light. "I am the coordinator. I am the one who enforces the law of the port. And my law says you do not push toxins into the residential zones. You do not sell poison to children. You do not bring chaos to the streets where people live. Orpheus broke that law." My breath caught. Poison, the word was a punch to the gut. What kind of toxins? "Illicit synthetics. Counterfeits, anything they can cut and move fast for a high margin. I had to brace myself against a dusty workbench. My mother, the coughing fits that had started so suddenly, the doctors who were mystified by her rapid decline. My mother, I said, the words thick, scraping my throat. She has chronic pain from an old factory injury, years ago. She was on painkillers, prescription stable. Ernesto watched me, his stillness absolute, his attention total. About 6 months ago, I continued, the memory making my stomach clench. Her pharmacy switched suppliers, a cost-saving measure. The pills looked off, but they swore it was the same compound. She got sicker, so much sicker. Dr. Evans said. He said the medication she was taking was contaminated, fake. It was cut with something that crystallized in her lungs. That is the complication. That is why she needs the surgery. I looked up, my eyes burning. It was not just her body failing. It was poison. Ernesto's expression did not change, but his eyes, they went flat, cold. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. The quiet observation was gone, replaced by something hard and final. "And the Orpheus Circle," he said. It was not a question. It was a verdict. They have been pushing counterfeit pharmaceuticals through shadow suppliers for 8 months, a new revenue stream. "So when you paid for her surgery," I whispered, the realization dawning, "you were not just helping me, you were cleaning up a mess. Your mess." "No," he said, his voice sharp, cutting. "Their mess. But it washed up on my shore, and it poisoned your family." He looked at me, and the ice in his eyes was gone, replaced by a slow, burning fire. "Now, it is not just business. Now, our motives are aligned." As if summoned by the tension, the heavy steel door to the warehouse opened, its hinges groaning. Rowan Cade entered, his broad frame filling the doorway. He held a tablet in one hand. He ignored me, his gaze fixed only on Ernesto. "Sir," Rowan said, his voice clipped, "we have a problem, a bigger one." "Speak." "The MIB was a test. It failed. So they are escalating. They have bought an asset inside the Harborway Intelligence Division, a mid-level analyst, Julian Price." Ernesto's jaw tightened. That is not street level. That is federal oversight. "Price is feeding Orpheus intel on our movements, and worse, he is helping them launch a media smear campaign. They are preparing a story. Port Kingpin uses vulnerable Waitress to infiltrate city business. They have photos, Lila, from the diner, from the hospital, from me picking you up tonight after the smoke bomb." I felt the blood drain from my face. They are going to put my face on the news, my name. "They will paint you as a honey trap," Rowan said bluntly, "and they will paint Mr. Bartolucci as a predator. They will use it to discredit Sal at the diner, and every other small business they are trying to flip. They want to trigger a full HID investigation into his holdings, using you as the trigger." Ernesto was silent for a long, heavy moment. He paced to the center of the room, standing under the largest of the empty frames. "They are trying to cut me off from the community," he said, thinking aloud, "from my eyes and ears. They are trying to make Sal, and everyone like him, afraid to even speak to me." He stopped pacing, and he looked right at me. "They think you are my weakness, my leverage." "You said that before," I said, my voice trembling. "So hide me. Let me disappear. I will run." "No," he said, his voice resolute. "We are going to do the opposite. We are going to make you my strength." I just stared at him. "What?" "I need a clean line of communication. They are watching my men. They are watching my known associates. They are watching my digital traffic. But they are not watching a Waitress, not one they think is just a victim they can print a story about." "What are you asking me to do?" I whispered, though I already knew. "I am proposing a contract," he said, his voice shifting, becoming all business. "A formal arrangement. I will provide comprehensive, permanent security for your mother, not just a guard at her door. I will move her to a private facility under an assumed name. I will cover 100% of her medical care from this moment until the day she is fully recovered. Her entire debt is gone." I held my breath. In exchange for what? Information. You go back to work at the tallow finch. It is half destroyed. It is full of smoke. It will be repaired by morning, he said, dismissing it. Sal will receive an anonymous donation from the Port Authority Benevolent Fund. You will go back to your job. You will work your shifts. You will serve coffee, and you will listen. He took a step closer. The circle is squeezing everyone. The delivery drivers, the other waiters, the cooks, the fishermen at the bar. They talk. They are scared. You will be my ears, a clean liaison. You do not pass threats. You do not carry anything illegal. You just listen, and you report what you hear only to me. It was insane. He was asking me to be a spy, to walk right back into the fire they had just set. But he was offering my mother's life. He was offering the one thing in the world I could not get on my own. I thought about the art supplies in the footlocker. I thought about his quiet, intense words. You chose not to be afraid. I lifted my chin. I looked him dead in the eye. I have conditions. From the corner, Rowan looked momentarily shocked. Ernesto did not. He just nodded, his gaze steady. Go on. 1, I said, my voice shaking but firm. This fight, this business of yours, it does not touch children, ever. I will not be part of anything that puts a minor at risk. No exceptions. Agreed, Ernesto said instantly, not a flicker of hesitation. 2, the money. For my mother. I will not take dirty money. Rowan scoffed. Ernesto silenced him with a single, sharp look. It has to be clean, I insisted, the words tumbling out. It has to go through a real fund, a charity, a grant, that benevolent fund you mentioned. I want the paperwork. I want it to be legitimate. I will not have her recovery paid for by this. I waved my hand, indicating the shadows, the power, the violence. It will be handled. Ernesto said, the fund is real. My lawyers will draft a grant for her care, citing hardship. It will be ironclad. And 3, I said, taking a deep, shuddering breath. The moment I say I am out, I am out. No questions, no arguments. The second I feel I am in too deep, or if you ask me to do something that crosses my line, I walk, and you let me walk. I expected him to negotiate, to barter, to counter. This was his world, after all. He did not. He said yes. Just yes. The speed of it, the absolute lack of hesitation, told me more about him than the entire night had. He had lines, he had boundaries, and I had, without knowing it, just drawn them perfectly. He stepped toward me, closing the small distance between us. He held out his hand. It was not a gesture of dominance. It was not a gesture of possession. It was the same hand I had grabbed in the diner. It was the hand of a man sealing a deal. Do we have a contract, Miss Moreno? I looked at his hand. Strong, clean, steady. This was it. This was the moment I was stepping off the solid ground and into his world of fog and dark water. I put my hand in his. We have a contract, Mr. Bartolucci. His grip was firm and warm, the same impossible warmth I had felt at the counter. But this time, he did not let go. We stood there, our hands clasped. It was longer than a handshake. It was a current. It was the heat from a forge, the simmer under the ice. It was a silent, sudden acknowledgement that this was not just a contract. It was an anchor. My heart was hammering, a slow, heavy beat that I was sure he could feel against his palm. His thumb moved, just a fraction, a small, rough stroke over my knuckles. It was the most intimate gesture I had ever known. It was terrifying. It was the only thing holding me upright. I finally, slowly, pulled my hand away. My skin tingled where he had touched me. The air in the room was thick, charged, and utterly silent. Rowan Cade cleared his throat, looking deeply uncomfortable. Sir, the HID analyst, Price, the media. Ernesto tore his gaze away from mine. The mask of the coordinator, the impassive harbor master, slammed back into place. But I had seen him. I had seen the man behind the ice. He turned to Rowan, but his final words were for me. Good. Let them write their story. Let them put her name in the paper. His voice was cold steel. Let them aim the spotlight right at her. It will make it that much easier to catch them when they step into the light to grab her. He looked back at me, and his eyes held a promise. And I will be waiting. The paperwork was done. It was, as Ernesto had promised, handled. I had spent the afternoon at a sterile, glass-walled office, signing documents for the Port Authority Benevolent Fund. My mother was now the recipient of a full, long-term care grant. Her debt was gone. The $7,000 was a ghost, vanquished by his signature. She was in a private room on a different floor, a floor I could only access with a new key card. When I left the hospital, Ernesto was waiting by the black sedan. He did not ask how it went. He knew. He just opened the door for me. As we drove back to the artifacts warehouse, the sky, which had been a bruised purple all day, finally broke. The rain came down in sheets, a furious, cleansing sound. By the time we were inside the vast, cold gallery, the storm was raging, the wind howling against the brick, the rain hammering the metal roof like drumfire. The lights flickered. Once, twice. Then, with a low groan, the entire building was plunged into darkness. The hum of the city, the distant sound of traffic, everything was swallowed by the roar of the storm. A second later, the emergency lights kicked in. They were not the harsh, sterile white of a hospital. They were a deep, warm yellow, casting long, dramatic shadows from the empty frames. The room, once cold and imposing, suddenly felt small, intimate, a pocket of calm in the middle of the tempest. I was standing in the center of the room, my jacket soaked from the run from the car. I was shivering. It was the cold. Yes, but it was also the adrenaline draining from my body, the release of months of terror over my mother's health. It was the sheer, dizzying fact of him, standing 10 feet away, a shadow in the golden light. He moved, his footsteps silent. I heard the rustle of his coat. "You are cold," he said. It was not a question. He was shrugging out of his own dry overcoat, the black wool one that seemed to drink the light. He did not toss it to me. He stepped close and draped it over my shoulders. It was heavy and so warm. It smelled of him something clean, like expensive soap, and a faint metallic trace I could not place. I clutched it, pulling it around me, my fingers sinking into the soft lining. My shivering did not stop, but it changed. It was no longer just the cold. It was the sudden, shocking proximity of him, the weight of his protection, the unnamed current that had been humming between us since the moment I first stole his hand. "Thank you." My voice was a whisper. He had made ginger tea before the lights went out, the electric kettle whistling just as the first flash of lightning had split the sky. He retrieved the 2 steaming mugs from a workbench. He handed one to me. The ceramic was hot, a solid, grounding presence in my trembling hands. We stood in silence for a moment, just listening to the storm. "So many," I said, looking at the walls, at the rows of empty frames, all these unpainted pictures. "They are not unpainted," he said, his voice quiet, almost reflective. He was standing near me, looking at a large, blank canvas that was propped on an easel. "They are just waiting." I walked over to it, drawn by the stark white square in the warm light. I was still wrapped in his coat. I raised a hand, tracing the shape of the empty frame, my fingertips grazing the rough texture of the canvas. "I do not even know if I remember how," I murmured, mostly to myself. "It has been so long since I held a brush." He was behind me. I did not hear him move. I just felt his presence, a sudden solid wall of warmth at my back. I tensed, my breath catching in my throat. He did not touch me, not at first. "What did you use to paint?" he asked. His voice was low, right by my ear. "Landscapes," I whispered. "Mostly storms. Actually, I love painting clouds, the way the light breaks through." "Show me." I cannot. There is no paint. It is dark." You do not need paint." His hand moved. It did not go to my waist or my shoulder. He reached out and his fingers closed, slowly, around my right wrist, the one that was not holding the mug. His grip was firm, his hand enveloping mine, his thumb resting on my pulse point. It was the same hand I had grabbed, the same hand I had used as a weapon. Now, it was holding me. Gently, he raised my hand to the canvas. "Show me," he said again. He stood directly behind me, his chest a solid presence against my back. I could feel the heat of him through his coat, through my clothes. I was enclosed. He was guiding my hand, his hand over mine, our fingers intertwined. My index finger was extended, and he pressed it lightly against the canvas. "The clouds," he prompted. He moved my hand, a long, slow, sweeping arc across the top of the canvas. It was almost an embrace, this strange, intimate lesson in the dark. He was taller than me, and he was leaning over me, his head beside mine, his focus entirely on the blank space in front of us. I could feel his breath, warm and steady against my temple. The world shrank. There was no storm. There was no Orpheus circle, no hospital, no debt. There was only the scrape of my fingernail on the canvas, the solid wall of his body, and the overwhelming scent of rain, dry wood, and the faint, sharp ginger from the tea on his breath. Our own breathing seemed to find the same rhythm, slow and deep, a shared silence in the golden dark. I turned my head, just a fraction. He was already looking at me. His eyes were not cold. They were not analytical. In the warm, yellow light, they were dark, deep, and full of a quiet, burning intensity. We were so close. I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the way the light caught the edge of his eyelashes. The silence spoke. It said everything. It asked the question I was too afraid to ask, and it gave the answer he was too careful to say. He did not move, but his gaze dropped, from my eyes to my mouth. It was the slowest movement in the world. He was giving me every chance to pull away, to turn my head, to break the spell. I did not. He leaned in, and his lips brushed mine. It was impossibly gentle, a test, a question. It was just the barest, softest pressure, a ghost of a touch, warm and hesitant. He was exploring, listening. He was waiting. His other hand, the one not holding my wrist, came up. It did not grab me. It did not pull me. He laid it, palm flat, against the small of my back, right on the heavy wool of his own coat. The gesture was solid, protective, and it was a question. "May I?" My answer was not a word. It was a tiny nod, a movement so small I barely felt it. But he did. I let my own hand, the one he was holding, relax. I let the mug in my other hand rest on the easel's ledge. I turned into him, just slightly, and my free hand came up, my fingers curling into the soft material of his sweater at his shoulder. I pulled him closer. The kiss deepened. It was not a collision, it was a claiming. It was still restrained, still measured, but the gentleness was now layered with a profound, undeniable heat. His lips moved over mine, learning me, teaching me. It was a promise of protection, an act of respect, a quiet, overwhelming vow of, "I am here." It was the slow, deep burn of restraint, far more potent than any reckless passion. We stayed like that, lost in the warm light, while the storm raged outside, a muffled roar. This was not a hurried release. This was a deliberate memory, a first moment built to last, not to be consumed. He was the one who pulled back, but only an inch, just enough to look at me again. His hand was still on my back, a solid anchor. My hand was still on his shoulder. He rested his forehead against mine. I closed my eyes, just breathing him in. The peace was absolute. He moved, his lips brushing my temple, then my ear. He spoke, his voice a low, rough vibration that traveled straight through me, a vow made in the dark, quiet center of the storm. "From now on, anyone who touches you has to go through me." The warmth of the previous night, of his promise, was the first thing I felt when I woke. I was on the cot in the artifacts, and for the first time in my life, I had slept without fear. I was safe. His coat was still draped over the back of a chair, and I reached out, just touching the wool. The steel door opened, and it was Rowan, and he was not looking at me. He was holding a tablet, his face grim. "Lila," he said, his voice flat. He did not call me Miss Moreno. He handed me the tablet. It was the online edition of the New Alexandria Gazette. The headline screamed Port Kingpin's new link waitress at center of dockside power struggle. My stomach dropped, and there it was, a grainy, long-lens photograph of me, my face pale in the darkness, being hurried from the smoke-filled diner into Ernesto's sedan, and another one, a shot of me, clearly visible, walking into the private entrance of the Artifacts warehouse. "The story claims you are a paid operative," Rowan said, his voice devoid of emotion, "that you are his liaison for the Orpheus Circle, and that your mother's illness was a cover story to launder money through the hospital fund." I could not breathe. That is a lie. Ernesto knows. Where is he? I looked around. The vast gallery was empty. The kettle was cold. "He saw this an hour ago," Rowan said. "He had business. He left. He saw this poison. And he left me here alone." The warmth of the night before turned to ash in my mouth. Before I could even form a response, the warehouse door rumbled open again. It was not Ernesto. It was two men in suits, clean-shaven with clear earpieces. They were not MIB. They were not cops. They were something else. "Miss Lila Moreno," the first one said. His voice was polite, sterile. "I am Agent Price, Harbor Way Intelligence Division. We need you to come with us. It is a matter of your own safety." My heart hammered. Hid. The agency Rowan had mentioned, the one Orpheus had compromised. I am safe here," I said, my voice trembling. "This warehouse is a known front for the Bartolucci Syndicate, ma'am," the second agent said, his eyes scanning the empty frames. "You are in the middle of a war zone. Please, cooperate." They were not asking. The HID safe room was a windowless office in a gray federal building. It smelled like stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Julian Price sat across from me, all false smiles and rehearsed sympathy. He slid a bottle of water across the desk. I did not touch it. "Lila, may I call you Lila? You are in a terrible position," he said, steepling his fingers. "Ernesto Bartolucci is a dangerous man. He preys on vulnerability. He saw you, a desperate girl, and he used you, your mother's illness. It was just a hook, a way to own you." He leaned in. "We know about the Orpheus Circle. We know Bartolucci is at war, and you are his pawn. That warehouse you are in. It is a non-secure location. The fact that we found you there proves it." He gestured to a large whiteboard behind him. My grainy newspaper photo was pinned to it. My name, Lila Moreno, was written in red marker. Lines connected me to Ernesto, to the Tallow Finch, to St. Jude's Hospital. I was not a person. I was a diagram. I was a piece of leverage. "You have a chance to get out, Lila," Price said, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "Help us. Help us take him down. We can put you in witness protection, a new life. Your mother, too. All you have to do is tell us what he is planning, wear a wire, get him to talk about his shipments, his dispute resolution." The betrayal was so cold, so absolute, it burned. They all saw me as a thing, a tool. Price, Orpheus, and now, maybe even Ernesto. "I need to think," I whispered. Price smiled. "Of course. Take your time, but not too much. A storm is coming. You need to choose which side you are on before it hits." They let me go. They knew I had nowhere else to run. I walked back to the Artifacts. The city felt hostile. Every face a threat. When I entered the warehouse, it was just as I had left it, cold, empty. Then I saw him. He was standing in the shadows, in front of the blank canvas we had stood at. His back was to me. "You are late," he said. His voice was flat. I was detained by Agent Price. He did not turn around. I know. He wants me to be an informant, to wear a wire, to trap you. I know. The coldness in his voice was a physical blow. The man who had held me, who had promised, he was gone. Did you see the paper? I asked, my voice shaking. I saw it. You know it is a lie. You know, after last night, you know it is not true. He was silent. Ernesto, I said, my voice breaking, look at me. Do you believe them? My throat closed. Do you trust me? He turned, slowly. His face was a mask of stone, the warmth, aseo, the vulnerability, the man who kept empty frames. He was gone. In his place was the coordinator, the Kingpin. I want to, Lila, he said, and his voice was rough, but pictures do not lie. The floor fell out from under me. It was not the Orpheus threat. It was not Price. It was this. His doubt. He had looked at the evidence, the grainy photo, the lies in the paper, and he had weighed it against the woman he had kissed in the dark. And the woman had lost. Before I could even find the words to fight, the door opened. It was Rowan, and his face was thunder. He did not look at me. He spoke directly to Ernesto. The leak is internal. Ernesto did not flinch. Explain. The photos, the warehouse shot, it was not long range. It was taken from inside our perimeter, from the C-block roof, just across the alley. The timestamps on the security logs for that block were digitally altered. Who? Ernesto's voice was deadly. The access codes used to alter the logs. They trace back to one terminal, Rowan said, and he looked sick. Mira Sorens. Ernesto's composure finally shattered. Mira, he said, his voice incredulous. That is impossible. She took a bullet for me 5 years ago. She has been my counsel. She is family. The logs are absolute, sir. I watched them. A cold, hard anger crystallizing in my chest. I was done being a victim. I was done being a pawn. I was done being doubted. She is the leak, I said, my voice sharp and clear. Both men turned to look at me, surprised by my tone. She is the leak, and Price is her contact. He did not find me. She told him where I was. I walked toward Ernesto, my fear gone, replaced by a pure, cold fury. You want proof, you believe in pictures, fine. I will get you pictures. They stared at me. Price wants me to be his informant, I said, my mind racing. He thinks I am a terrified girl who will roll over to save herself. He's waiting for my call. I looked at Ernesto. I'm going to call him. I am going to agree to cooperate. I am going to tell him. I am going to cry. And I am going to tell him I am so scared. I overheard you talking about a massive urgent shipment. Something vital. Tonight at 10 o'clock. Pier 17. Warehouse 9. Warehouse 9 is empty, Rowan said. It has been for a month. Exactly, I said. Price will feed that information to Mira or to Orpheus directly. And when they hit that warehouse, you will be there. Not with guns, with cameras. I went to Price's office. I gave the performance of my life. I cried. I was terrified. I told him I wanted out. I told him I heard Ernesto himself on the phone. He said, Warehouse 9, 10 o'clock. It has to be tonight. Please, you have to get me out before then. Price's eyes lit up, a predatory gleam he tried to hide behind a mask of sympathy. You did the right thing. Lila, you are going to be fine. That night, in the artifacts, we watched. Rowan had set up a live feed from 2 different cameras across from Warehouse 9. The warehouse was dark. The pier was silent. At 9:58, 2 black vans with no plates rolled up. At 10 o'clock, a dozen men from the Orpheus Circle, armed and ready, swarmed the building. They found nothing but dust and empty crates. And as they stood in the empty bay, confused and angry, 2 other vans pulled up. Bright white news vans, and then the flashing blue and red lights of the New Alexandria PD. Rowan had made the calls. We watched on the monitor as the Orpheus crew was caught, red-handed, on camera, in the middle of a major breaking and entering. The news anchors were already calling it a bold move by the port's most violent new gang. The warehouse was silent. I did not look at Ernesto. I just watched the screen. I heard his footsteps. He stopped directly in front of me. I finally looked up. The Kingpin was gone. The mask was gone. His face was full of a deep, profound shame. "I let fear cloud my judgment," he said. His voice was low, and it was raw. I looked at the pictures, at the evidence. I did not look at the person, at you. I will not make that mistake again, Lila. It was not enough, but it was a start. Rowan, who'd been on his phone, suddenly cursed. "Sir, Mira, her terminal just went dark. She is gone." "Did she leave anything?" Ernesto asked, his voice hard again. "She left this." Rowan held up a small, elegant, cream-colored card. It was thick, expensive cardstock. It was on her desk. He handed it to Ernesto. I stepped closer to look. It was an invitation, embossed in gold script, to the Astor Aquarium Annual Founders Gala, a major city event. And on the back, in Mira's elegant, familiar handwriting, was a single, chilling message. "Do not come, it is a trap." I looked at Ernesto. The implication hung in the air between us. "She knew we would find it," I said. He nodded, his jaw set. "It is not a warning," he said, his voice like iron. "It is an invitation." The Astor Aquarium was not built to hold fish. It was built to hold money. It was a cavernous structure of glass and blue-lit water, a monument to New Alexandria's old money ambitions. Tonight, it was hosting the annual Founders Gala, and the most dangerous predators in the city were not behind the glass. They were in tuxedos, holding champagne flutes, their reflections sliding over the surfaces of the shark tanks, senators, judges, shipping magnates, and the men who preyed on them. The air was thick with perfume and the quiet, high-pitched whine of forced civility. I was invisible, and it was the perfect cover. I wore a black blazer, a simple event coordinator badge, and a communications earpiece. I was a volunteer, supposedly helping the wealthy patrons find the silent auction. In reality, I was a ghost, my eyes scanning, listening, and mapping the floor. At 8:15, Ernesto Bartolucci arrived. He did not look like a kingpin. He looked like old money. His suit was dark, perfectly tailored, and understated. He was announced as a major donor to the Astor Green Port Initiative, a legitimate environmental fund his company sponsored. He smiled, shook the fundraiser's hand, and accepted a glass of champagne. He was the picture of civic duty. I saw the others circling. Rowan Cade was already there, disguised as an audio-visual technician. He was testing microphones at the podium, his broad shoulders filling out a blue Astor staff polo shirt. He was calibrating for feedback, tapping the mic, his eyes never stopping, counting every face. He was seeding the system. Any Orpheus radio frequency near the stage would now create a feedback loop, broadcasting their commands to the whole room. Agent Julian Price of HID was working the room, his smile too wide, his eyes too bright. He was not here to arrest anyone. He was here to collect. I watched him accidentally bump into Ernesto near the Ray exhibit. "Mr. Bartolucci, so sorry," Price said, his voice dripping with false sincerity as he brushed an imaginary piece of lint off Ernesto's lapel. It was a classic plant, a high-frequency transmitter, no bigger than a button. It was on Ernesto. Price was hoping to record an incriminating conversation, something to justify his budget, something to make him the hero who took down both Orpheus and the Bartolucci syndicate. He wanted to be the only shark left in the tank. Ernesto, who had seen the move coming, did not flinch. He simply smiled, a cold, polite expression. "Think nothing of it, Agent." The game was on. I moved away, directing a wealthy couple toward the seahorse exhibit. I needed to find Mira. Her invitation was a trap, but it was also a cry for help. I found her signal by the jellyfish. The tank was a massive, pulsing column of blue and pink light. I was pretending to check the velvet rope when I saw it, a reflection, high up in the curved glass, coming from the dark, Second floor observation deck. It was a pinprick of white light flashing. B to underscore. Underscore the SSOU. It was weak, almost lost in the pulsing bioluminescence of the tank. Mira. Underscore B, tie. BT, Blue Trench, the main shark tunnel. I had to warn Ernesto, but Price was watching him. The bug live. I could not approach. I had to make him come to me. I picked up the tour rotation schedule. I led a small group of art collectors. My voice bright and professional. And if you will follow me, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to begin the 10 o'clock feeding in the main attraction, the Blue Trench Tunnel. I led them down the ramp, the water closing over us, sharks and massive groupers sliding silhouettes over our heads. Ernesto was there, leaning against the glass, appearing to watch the fundraiser. Mr. Davies, give a speech. Price was 10 feet away, pretending to study a plaque. I walked my group directly past him. I did not slow down. I did not look him in the eye. As I passed, my shoulder almost brushing his. I kept the professional smile on my face. And here, Mr. Bartolucci, you can see our largest sand tiger, I said, my voice projecting for the group. Then, just for him, a whisper that was lost in the tunnel's echo. Blue Trench, after 10:10, go alone. The bug is on your left lapel. Ditch it. I did not wait to see his reaction. I just kept walking, my heart hammering against my ribs. The teeth, as you can see, are non-functional for chewing. I had planted the seed. Now I had to find Mira. At 10:09, the gala was at its peak. The orchestra was playing. I saw the Orpheus crew, badly disguised as waiters, moving toward the fundraiser. Mr. Davies, their plan was clumsy. Snatch the civilian leader and demand a ransom, pinning the crime on Ernesto's well-known aggression. At 10:10, I slipped through a staff-only door. The sound of the gala vanished, replaced by the heavy, damp thrum of industrial pumps. This was the aquarium's gut. I followed the narrow catwalk down. Mira was waiting in the main filtration hub, a concrete room filled with massive, roaring pipes. She was not the cold, calculating woman from Ernesto's office. She was a wreck. Her eyes were red. Her elegant gala dress was stained with grease from the wall. "You came," she whispered, her voice raw. "You knew I would. What is this? Mira, you set us up. You leaked the photos." "I did not. I had no choice." Her composure broke. "It is my brother, my little brother, Leo." She was shaking, pulling at her hair. "He's stupid. He got into gambling debt, thousands, with the Orpheus Circle. I tried to pay it, but they did not want money. They wanted me. They wanted access. They said if I did not feed them intel, if I did not help them frame Ernesto, they would. They would send Leo back to me, in pieces." The betrayal was not greed, it was desperation. "They have him," she choked out. "They are holding him in the sublevel, the old quarantine tanks. They are going to make the snatch for Davies, and then they are going to kill Leo anyway. They said I just had to get Ernesto here. It is a kill box, Lila, for everyone." Her plan had been to warn us away, to save us, but Orpheus had outplayed her. "Where is Price in this?" I asked, my voice hard. "He does not care about Leo," she wept. "He just wants the chaos. He's waiting for the Orpheus snatch to happen, and then his HID team is going to storm the place. He will arrest the Orpheus crew, and he will rescue the hostage, and he will detain Ernesto for questioning. He wins. He becomes the hero who cleaned up the port." I looked at Mira. She was broken, but I was not. I was angry. I looked at the wall of monitors and control panels. "What does this room control?" "Everything," she said, wiping her nose. "The pumps, the lights, the AV feed to the main dome. The main dome, the massive, curved ceiling above the gala floor, where they were currently projecting images of blue, swirling water." "Rowan hacked the audio," I said, my mind racing, the plan snapping into place. "Price is broadcasting on an open mic, trying to bait Ernesto. Orpheus is using radios. And you have access to the projectors." Mira looked at me, confused. "What are you..." "Warning Ernesto is not enough," I said. "Hiding is not enough." I grabbed her arm. "We are going to flip the entire board. Right now." "How?" "Ernesto is not going to run. He's going to be the distraction. He's going to walk right into Price's trap, in front of everyone. He will be the bait." I pointed to the main control board, and while all of them are watching him, while Price is listening and Orpheus is moving, you and I are going to change the show. We are not just going to stop them. We are going to broadcast every single piece of their dirty laundry onto the ceiling for the entire city to see. I grabbed the master projector controls. "You wanted to save your brother. Mira, we save him. But we do it by burning them all to the ground, right here, in the middle of their party." Mira hit the main breaker. The gala died, the orchestra cut out, a single violin hanging in the air before being swallowed by a synthesized voice that boomed from Rowan's hacked speakers. Security protocol engaged, lockdown initiated. The soft blue ambient light vanished, replaced by the rhythmic, angry pulse of red emergency strobes. The panic was instantaneous, but it was the water that caused the terror. The massive pumps for the main exhibits reversed, churning the tranquil tanks into a violent, thrashing storm. The sharks in the blue trench, agitated by the noise and the pressure change, began to slam against the glass. The guests screamed, a single high-pitched wave of sound. This was the chaos Orpheus had planned. I was already moving. Mira fled toward the sublevels to find her brother. Her parting words a choked, "Good luck." I ran for the staff ladder, the one leading to the high Gothic catwalk suspended 40 feet above the main floor. I had to get to the central AV hub. I scrambled up the narrow, cold metal, my breath hitching, my new event coordinator blazer catching on a bolt. I ripped the fabric free, ignoring the sound. Below me was a sea of red-lit panic. People were falling, slipping on spilled champagne, shoving each other toward exits that were now closing. My earpiece, the one Rowan had given me, crackled. It was not static. It was breathing. "They have hit the lights, Lila!" Ernesto's voice said. It was impossibly calm, a steady, low anchor in the screaming chaos. "Price is moving on me. Where are you?" "I am on the ladder," I panted, pulling myself onto the narrow, vibrating metal grid of the catwalk. The red strobes flashed, making the crowd below look like a disjointed, struggling mass. I am going for the main projector. My hands, they are shaking. I fumbled with the latch on the main AV control box. It was a simple padlock, but my fingers were numb, useless. "Stop. Do not look down," his voice commanded. Intimate and absolute, a private line in a public war. "Look at the lock. Just the lock. Breathe with me." I squeezed my eyes shut, my forehead pressed against the cold steel. 4 counts in, his voice murmured. 1, 2, 3, 4. I inhaled, the air burning my lungs. 4 counts out, 1, 2, 3, 4. I exhaled, my body shuddering. Again. We breathed together. I opened my eyes. The shaking had not stopped, but the panic had receded. It was just a task. I got the lock open on the first try. Below me, the second act of the play was starting. Julian Price, flanked by 2 of his own armed HID agents, was striding through the crowd, his gun pointed at the ceiling. Nobody move, HID federal agents. He was performing. He zeroed in on Ernesto, who was standing alone by the ruined stage, a perfect picture of calm isolation. "Ernesto Bartolucci," Price shouted, his voice ringing with triumph. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, public endangerment, and extortion." He was making his show, the one he had told me about. He wanted the media to see him cuffing the Kingpin. He pulled out the handcuffs. Ernesto looked at Price. He looked at the gun. He looked at the panicked crowd, then, slowly, he raised his hands. He was stalling. He was accepting the cuffs, buying me the seconds I needed. "I am in," I whispered into the mic, plugging my tablet into the main projector feed, the tablet Mira had loaded with everything. "Price is cuffing you now. Start the show, Lila." On the massive domed ceiling 40 feet above the crowd, the swirling projection of blue water vanished. It was replaced by a high-resolution scan of a document, a bank transfer, from a shell company owned by Orpheus to a private account, an account belonging to the Metropolitan Integrity Bureau. Price, who was in the middle of snapping the first cuff on Ernesto's wrist, froze, and he looked up. His face, illuminated by the red strobes, turned a sick, pale gray. "Rowan, hit the audio," I said. Suddenly, Rowan's feedback loop engaged, the aquarium's high-fidelity sound system, which had been playing Vivaldi, now blasted the audio from the Orpheus team's own radios. "Grab Davies. He is by the ray tank. Get him to the van. Now." The crowd stopped screaming. They just stared up. Then, a new audio feed layered over it, the recording from the bug Price had planted, the one Ernesto had ditched on the table next to an Orpheus waiter. Price's voice, slick and conspiratorial, filled the entire aquarium. "Let them grab him. We need the hostage situation to look real. We move in after they have him. I want Bartolucci and the Orpheus leader in the same net. It is the only way to justify the budget. Make it look like a rescue." The proof was absolute. The MIB was dirty. Orpheus was staging the kidnapping, and HID was directing the entire catastrophe. I was so focused on the monitor, I did not hear him. A shadow, moving between the red flashes of the strobe, an Orpheus goon who had seen me climb. He was on the catwalk, his face masked, a knife glinting in his hand. My blood turned to ice. I fumbled for my mic, my throat closing. "Ernesto, catwalk, I have company." Below, Ernesto looked up, cuffed, his face a mask of sudden fury. He saw the silhouette. He could not reach me. "Rowan," he barked, his voice a roar that cut through the audio. "The strobe's full blast now." The red lights died, the world went black, then whump! A blinding, disorienting white strobe flashed 3 times a second, turning the world into a series of fractured, terrifying photographs. The goon lunged, blinded, disoriented. "Ernesto," I whispered, my back hitting the railing. "I'm borrowing your hand, one more time." I knew he understood. This was not a fight. It was a bluff. It was the tallow finch, magnified by 1,000. Flash, the goon was 10 feet away. Dark. I did not run. I grabbed a thick-lying coiled power cable with my left hand, anchoring myself. Flash, he was closer, raising the knife, dark. I did not shrink. I moved toward him. Flash, I was right in his face. My right hand, which had been hidden, arced up. I was not holding a weapon. I was holding my tablet, the metal edge catching the light like a blade. I screamed, a raw, wordless sound, my arm pumping down in a brutal, stabbing motion, a shadow play, projected by the strobe, dark. The goon did not try to block. He did not know it was a bluff. He just saw the flash of steel, the killing motion. He cried out, a high-pitched sound of terror, and flinched back violently. His foot missed the metal grid of the catwalk. He windmilled his arms, dropping the knife. He toppled over the low railing. He fell, screaming, and hit the decorative safety netting 20 feet below with a sickening, final thud. He was tangled, caught. The crowd below, who had seen the whole shadow play, gasped. In that 1 second of stunned silence, Ernesto moved. He brought his cuffed hands up and over Julian Price's head, snapping the chain tight across the agent's throat. He twisted, using Price's own momentum, and slammed the agent face first onto the wet marble floor. It was not a brawl. It was a clean, precise, devastating maneuver. Before the HID agents could even raise their weapons, Ernesto had the cuff key from Price's belt. He unlocked his own wrist, spun Price onto his back, and snapped the empty cuff onto the agent's other hand. It took less than 5 seconds. The stunned agents looked at their boss, cuffed and gasping on the floor. They looked at the projector screen, which was now showing Price's face next to a federal statute on public corruption. They lowered their guns. The Orpheus crew, their audio exposed, scattered, only to be tackled by Rowan and other aquarium security. Across the hall, I saw Mira burst from a service door, dragging a terrified, skinny young man. Her brother. She had him. It was over. I sagged against the railing, the adrenaline draining so fast I felt sick. "Do not move, Bartolucci." The voice was new, cold. It came from the main stage. Cale Dorian, the true leader of Orpheus, his tuxedo was torn, his face bleeding, but his eyes were cold and sane. He was holding a small gray box with a red switch, a dead man's detonator. "You," he hissed. "Cost me everything, my men, my money, Price." Rowan started to move. "Stop!" Cale screamed, his thumb pressing on the switch. "One step, and I level this entire wing. The charges are in the foundation. I lose. You all lose." He needed a hostage. He grabbed the closest person. Ernesto. Cale pressed the detonator to Ernesto's temple. "Everyone, out, now, or your port Kingpin is the first to go." I was still on the catwalk. He had not seen me. I scrambled down the ladder, my legs shaking. I hit the main floor. Cale was backing toward the shark tunnel exit, dragging Ernesto with him. "Cale!" I shouted. He spun, his eyes finding me. "The waitress, the ghost. I should have dealt with you first." "You still can," I said. I walked toward him, my hands held up, open. I was holding my phone. "You want to be famous. You want to make a statement. You want the whole city to know your name. Cale." "Shut up," he screamed, pulling Ernesto tighter. "Go ahead," I said. I was 10 feet away. "But you should know, the AV feed is still live, and I am streaming this to every news outlet in the city. The entire town is watching you right now. Go on. Be the man who blows up an aquarium full of people. Push the button." Cale's eyes darted from me to the dead man's switch, to the crowd. He was a creature of the shadows. I had just put him on the biggest stage in the world, with the brightest spotlight. He hesitated. His thumb twitched. He wanted to push it, but he could not. That hesitation was all Rowan needed. Rowan did not run. He launched himself, a 400-pound projectile, in a low, diving tackle. He hit Cale at the knees. Cale went down. The detonator flew from his grasp, skittering across the wet marble floor. Rowan was on Cale in an instant, a heavy fist rising and falling. The fight was over. I just stood there, my phone still held high, my hand shaking, the live stream broadcasting nothing but the sound of my own ragged breathing. The red and blue lights were the first to arrive, painting the agitated water in the tanks with fresh panic. Then came the sound sirens, not just one, but a dozen, closing in on the Astor Aquarium from all sides. The front doors, which had been locked down by Orpheus, were forced open, and the first uniforms that flooded the gala floor were not hid. They were new Alexandria City security, followed by sober-looking men in dark suits. "New Alexandria Port Commission," their leader announced, his voice a clean, authoritative bark that cut through the hysteria. "Everyone stay where you are." The scene they found was damning. Julian Price was still on the floor, his hands cuffed behind him, his face a mask of disbelief. The fake MIB agents, who had been trying to blend in with the guests, were pointed out by Sal and other business owners who had been terrorized by them. The Orpheus crew, including a bound Cale Dorian, were zip-tied on the floor, Rowan Cade standing over them like a mountain. The evidence was still playing on the domed ceiling for the Port Commission to see. The bank transfers, the audio files. My live stream had, in effect, broadcast the entire coup to the city's highest authorities. Price's corrupt wing of HID was gutted on the spot. The MIB was exposed as a complete fabrication, an extortion arm of the Orpheus Circle. Amidst the chaos, Ernesto Bartolucci did not move. He stood in the center of the floor, his tuxedo jacket gone, his white shirt streaked with grime. The new commissioner, a hard-faced woman named Taryn, approached him. "Mr. Bartolucci," she said, her voice wary, "you seem to be at the center of this." The press, who had arrived with the police, swarmed, cameras flashing. This was his moment to run, to fade back into the shadows he commanded. He did not. He looked at the cameras, at the commissioner, and his voice was clear. "Carrying across the marble? My name is Ernesto Bartolucci. I coordinate business for the associated families of the New Alexandria port. It was the first time I had heard him claim it. For months, this city has been poisoned by the Orpheus Circle. He gestured to Cale Dorian. They sold counterfeit medicine that hurt families, including Miss Moreno's. They extorted our local businesses, and they did it with the help of corrupt officials in our own government. He looked directly into the cameras. I protect the port. My job is to keep the poison out. Tonight, we did that. As for any other disputes, he said, his eyes finding Price, I will be happy to answer any questions. I have nothing to hide from a civil court. He turned to the commissioner and held his hands out, not in surrender, but in offering. I will go with you to make a full statement. She nodded, surprised by the candor. Take him. They did not cuff him, but they walked him out, a phalanx of security around him, leaving me alone on the floor, the flashing lights, the shouting, the questions. It all blurred. I watched him disappear into the sea of flashing lights, and a cold, sharp fear, worse than anything Cale Dorian or Julian Price could inflict, seized my heart. What if he did not come back? What if, in his bid for legitimacy, he was swallowed by the very system he had just saved? I could not breathe. I shoved my way through the crowd, past the gawking senators and the crying socialites. I pushed open a side door and stumbled out onto a terrace, into the quiet night. The chaos of the gala was muffled behind the thick glass. The rain, which had been a deluge, had softened to a fine, cold mist. It slicked the stone patio, the air smelling of ozone, wet concrete, and the faint, salty tang of the aquarium's filtration system. My hands were freezing. I wrapped my arms around myself, but the chill was inside me. My heart was pounding, a slow, heavy drumbeat of dread. He was gone. He had let them take him. I had finally found a single solid point in a world of chaos, and I had just watched him walk away. I stood there for an hour, maybe two. The sirens faded. The crowd dispersed. The only sound was the light rain on the glass awning above me. I heard the door open behind me. I did not turn. I could not. My hope was too fragile. I was terrified it was just another agent, here to question me. But then I felt him, a change in the air, a familiar warmth that cut through the cold mist. He was standing right behind me. I turned slowly. He was soaked. His black vest was plastered to his chest, his hair dark with rain. He must have been standing outside, in the processing area, for hours. He was not cuffed. He was alone. Lila, he said. My name was a breath of relief. You are here, I whispered. I thought they let me go, he said. He took a step toward me. Your evidence was absolute. The projector feeds, the audio, the bank records Mira had collected. It was not a conspiracy, it was a data dump. Price and Cale Dorian, they confessed, they are implicating each other to save themselves. The case is closed. He stopped, just a foot away, the mist swirling around us. His eyes, which had been so cold, so controlled, were now undefended. They were soft, and they were fixed on me, as if I were the only real thing in the world. I saw you, he said, his voice low, waiting. I saw you through the window. You were still here. I was not leaving without you, I said, my voice thick. He reached out, his hand gently touching my cheek. His fingers were cold from the rain, but the touch was electric. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I made you a weapon, I whispered back. You did not, he said. You just aimed me. And then I was in his arms. It was not a desperate, frantic collision. It was a homecoming. It was an unhurried, absolute embrace, his arms locking around my waist, pulling me against his solid, rain-dampened chest. I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing him in, my hands clinging to his jacket. I felt his long, slow sigh, a release of tension that seemed to drain years of command from his shoulders. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his hands framing my face. He kissed me. It was not the hesitant, exploratory kiss from the warehouse. It was not the desperate, clinging kiss of a battlefield. It was a deep, gentle, certain kiss. It was a vow. It was the rain and the city and the promise of a quiet morning. It was 1,000 words spoken in a single, unhurried moment under the shelter of the glass. When he finally pulled away, he rested his forehead against mine, our breath mingling in the cold air. "Lila," he said, his voice rough, "I cannot promise you a peaceful life. I cannot promise you a safe one." He looked past me, at the city lights of New Alexandria blurred by the mist. "My world is this. It is the fog, the port, the shadows. It is fighting men like Cale Dorian and Price." He looked back at me, his gaze intense. "I cannot promise you an easy life, but I can promise that I will spend every day making this city less dark. I will make it cleaner. I will use what I have to protect the people in it, but I cannot do it alone." He held my gaze. "I do not want to do it alone. Stay with me." The cold was gone. I was filled with a warmth that had nothing to do with his coat. I thought of the empty frames, the blank canvas, the fear I had lived with my entire life. He was not offering me a fortress. He was offering me a fight, and for the first time, I was not fighting just to survive. I smiled, a real, slow smile. "I will hang my first painting in the artifacts." He looked confused, just for a second. "It will be a picture of the port in the fog," I continued, my hand coming up to rest on his heart. I could feel the steady beat, and I will hang it in that drafty corner, by the old gallery door, the place where you first held my hand to draw. A week later, Mira Sorrent and Rowan Cade were standing on Pier 9, watching a new sign being painted, the Lila Moreno Clean Fishermen's Fund, a joint venture funded by the Port Commission and the Bartolucci Holdings to support the local families affected by the Orpheus racket. Mira, having given testimony that secured Cale Dorian's federal indictment, was running it. Her brother was safe, her debt was paid. The Tallow Finch reopened 2 weeks after that. Sal had used the benevolent fund money to install new booths, a new counter, and a security system that actually worked. It was a Friday night, and the place was packed. It was loud, happy. I was pouring coffee, my apron feeling lighter than it ever had. Ernesto was in his corner booth. He was just drinking ginger tea, watching. A new customer, a salesman from out of town, got loud. He was angry about his bill. "What kind of clip joint is this? I am not paying this." He slammed his hand on the counter, making me jump. I looked at him. I looked at Ernesto. A slow, wicked smile spread across my face. I walked over, picked up Ernesto's hand from the table, and walked back to the counter. I set his hand down, palm flat on the formica, right next to the cash register. The salesman stared at it. "He does not like getting his hands dirty," I said, my voice sweet and low. "Do not make him get his hands dirty again, okay?" The diner went quiet for 1 beat, 2 beats, then Sal burst out laughing. It was a real, deep belly laugh. A few of the regulars, who had been there that first night, joined in. The salesman, confused but suddenly very, very intimidated, just nodded. "Right, sorry, here you go." He paid the bill and hurried out. I smiled, starting to pick up the hand to return it. But this time he did not let me. Ernesto was standing beside me. He turned his hand over and laced his fingers through mine, right there on the counter. It was not a threat. It was not a weapon. It was a signal, a new, quiet peace in a city that had finally come through the storm. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to connect with you, so please comment below and let us know where in the world you are listening from, and share your thoughts on Lila and Ernesto's journey. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. It truly helps. To support us even more, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by many more people.